What happens when royalty meets reality television and a prince's sense of privilege collides with one of the sharpest tongues in late night? It only took 37 seconds after one comment for a member of the British royal family to completely lose his composure and storm off set in what would become one of the most jaw-dropping moments in talk show history. Bill Maher sat behind his desk with that familiar smirk, the one that tells you he's about to say something that'll make half the audience uncomfortable. His guest for the evening was Prince Harry, who had flown in to promote his latest charitable initiative. The studio audience buzzed with excitement. Royalty on American late-night television always drew a crowd. "So, Prince Harry, welcome to the show," Bill said, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd interviewed presidents and pop stars alike. "I gotta say, it's not every day we get actual royalty in here. Usually we just get people who think they're royalty." The audience laughed. Harry smiled, but it was tight around the edges. "Thanks for having me, Bill. Happy to be here. Now, you've been living in California for a while now. How's that working out? Traded the palace for Montecito. That's quite the downgrade, isn't it?" Bill grinned, and the audience chuckled again. Harry's smile faltered, just slightly. "Well, I wouldn't call it a downgrade. We're very happy there. It's given us the privacy and freedom we were looking for." "Privacy," Bill repeated, nodding slowly. Right. Privacy. That's an interesting word coming from someone who's done, what? How many interviews now? A Netflix series? A book? Multiple podcasts? That's a lot of privacy you're sharing with the world. The audience gave an awkward laugh. Harry shifted in his seat. "Look, there's a difference between controlling your own narrative and having it controlled for you by tabloids and a system that doesn't care about your well-being," Harry said, his voice taking on an edge. Sure, Bill said, waving his hand dismissively. "But here's the thing I don't get. You left the royal family because you wanted privacy. You wanted to be normal, right? But then, you keep reminding everyone you're a prince. You can't have it both ways, buddy. Either you're a regular guy or you're royalty. Pick a lane." Harry's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Bill, that's a massive oversimplification of a very complex situation." "Is it, though?" Bill leaned forward now, his interviewer instincts kicking in. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want all the benefits of being a prince. The title, the fame, the platform, but none of the responsibilities that come with it. And when people call you out on that, you play the victim card." The studio went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room change. Harry's face flushed red. "That's not fair," Harry said, his voice rising. "You have no idea what it's like to grow up in that family. To deal with that kind of pressure, that kind of scrutiny. My mother died because of the media, in case you've forgotten." Bill didn't flinch. "I haven't forgotten. That was a tragedy, no question. But Harry, that was decades ago. At some point, you have to stop using your mother's death as a justification for every decision you make. You're a grown man. You've got kids of your own now." Harry stood up abruptly, his microphone pack pulling against his belt. "How dare you? How dare you bring my mother into this and diminish what happened to her?" "I'm not diminishing anything," Bill said calmly, still seated. "I'm saying that trauma, as real as it is, doesn't give you a free pass to be a hypocrite. You can't trash your family on international television, sign multi-million-dollar deals to tell your side of the story, and then get mad when people have opinions about it." "You don't know what you're talking about," Harry shot back, pointing a finger at Bill. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes about things you don't understand, judging people's lives like you're some kind of authority. Who do you think you are?" Bill raised his eyebrows. "I'm a talk show host, Harry. It's literally my job to have opinions and make jokes. You came on my show. You knew what this was. I came here to talk about my charity work, not to be attacked by some bitter American comedian who's jealous of anyone with actual relevance," Harry spat. The audience gasped. Bill's expression didn't change, but there was a glint in his eye now. Jealous? Bill repeated slowly. Of you. That's rich. Harry, I've been doing this show for over 20 years. I've interviewed actual world leaders, people who've changed history. You're a guy who was born into money and spent most of his adult life complaining about how hard it is to be born into money. That's it, Harry said, ripping off his microphone. I don't have to sit here and listen to this disrespect. Do you have any idea who I am? Yeah, Bill said, finally standing up. You're a guy who walked away from his family, his country, and his responsibilities because they weren't fun anymore. And now you're walking off my show because I asked you some basic questions. Very on brand. Harry's face was scarlet now. You're an absolute disgrace. In my country, you'd never get away with speaking to someone like me this way. Well, good thing we're in America then, Bill said. Land of the free, home of the brave, where we don't bow to princes, especially ones who can't handle a little pushback. This is exactly the kind of toxic, disrespectful behavior that made me leave the UK in the first place, Harry said, his voice shaking with anger. Everyone thinking they have a right to judge me, to tear me down, to act like my feelings don't matter. Bill crossed his arms. Your feelings matter, Harry, but so does accountability. You can't spend years publicly criticizing your family, making money off that criticism, and then act shocked when people criticize you back. That's not how it works. My family is none of your business, Harry snapped. You made it everyone's business when you wrote a book about it, Bill countered. Look, I get it. You had a tough childhood. Your mom died tragically. Your dad wasn't perfect. The press was brutal. All of that is true, and all of that sucks. But you're not the only person in the world who's dealt with difficult family dynamics or media scrutiny. The difference is most people don't have millions of dollars in the bank and a mansion in California while they complain about it. Harry grabbed his jacket from the chair. I'm not going to stand here and be lectured by someone who clearly has no empathy, no understanding of what real trauma looks like. I have plenty of empathy, Bill said. What I don't have patience for is entitlement. And Harry, you're dripping with it. You think because you're a prince, because you've suffered, that gives you the right to be above criticism. It doesn't. You know what your problem is? Harry said, pointing at Bill again. You're threatened by people like me who actually use their platform for good, who actually try to make a difference in the world. All you do is sit here and mock people. Bill laughed, a genuine laugh. Threatened by you? Harry, I've been donating to charity and speaking out about important issues since before you were born. The difference is, I don't need a Netflix deal to do it. And I don't need to trash my family in public to feel better about myself. This conversation is over, Harry declared. Yeah, I figured it would be, Bill said. The minute someone challenges you, you run. Just like you ran from your royal duties. Just like you're running now. It's a pattern, Harry. Harry turned to walk off stage, then spun back around. You're a bully. That's what you are. You hide behind comedy and free speech, but you're just a bully who gets off on making people feel small. Bill's expression hardened. I'm a bully? That's funny coming from someone who's been bullying his own family for years. You went on international television and accused them of racism. You wrote a book airing their private conversations. You've spent years painting them as villains to make yourself look like the hero. But I'm the bully for asking you about it? They deserved it, Harry said quietly, and the audience gasped again at the admission. Did they? Bill asked. Did your grandmother deserve it? Did she deserve to spend her final years watching her grandson trash the family she devoted her entire life to? Did your brother deserve to have his private arguments with you published in a book? Did your father deserve to be called a bad parent on global television? Harry's hands were shaking now. You don't get to talk about my family. You don't know them. You don't know what they did to me. To my wife. You're right, I don't know them, Bill agreed. All I know is what you've told the world. And based on that, It sounds like you had a family that loved you, supported you, gave you every privilege imaginable, and made some mistakes along the way, like every family does. But instead of handling it privately, you decided to burn it all down publicly. They gave me no choice, Harry insisted. There's always a choice, Harry. You chose money and fame over family. You chose Netflix over your nephew and nieces. You chose being a celebrity victim over being a responsible member of the royal family. Own it. Harry's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I don't have to justify my choices to you or anyone else. Then why are you here? Bill spread his arms wide. Why do this interview? Why do any of the interviews? If you're so comfortable with your choices, why do you need to keep explaining them to everyone? Harry grabbed his phone from his pocket, his hands still trembling. I came here thinking you were a serious interviewer who would actually listen. Clearly, I was wrong. No, you came here thinking I'd give you a platform to play victim again without any pushback. And when you didn't get that, you threw a tantrum. Very prince-like. I'm calling my security, Harry said, scrolling on his phone. Your security? Bill laughed. Harry, you're in a television studio in Los Angeles, not Buckingham Palace. You don't need security to leave. The door's right there. Although I gotta say, this is pretty great television. Very dramatic. Your PR team is probably having a heart attack right now. Screw you, Bill, Harry said, his voice cracking. The audience was dead silent. This had gone from uncomfortable to train wreck television. Look, Bill said, his tone softening just slightly. I don't hate you, Harry. I actually feel bad for you. I think you've been manipulated. I think you've made some terrible decisions. And I think you're surrounding yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. But that doesn't mean you get to act like a spoiled brat when someone challenges you. I am not spoiled, Harry said through gritted teeth. You literally just threatened to call security because someone disagreed with you on a talk show. If that's not spoiled, I don't know what is. Harry looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the crew members watching this unfold. This is exactly what they did to my mother. This is exactly the kind of ambush that she faced every single day. This is not an ambush, Bill said firmly. This is a conversation. A tough conversation, sure, but that's what happens in interviews sometimes. Your mother, God rest her soul, faced actual ambushes from paparazzi who chased her down and invaded her privacy. I'm sitting here asking you questions about things you voluntarily put in the public domain. There's a massive difference. You're twisting everything I say, Harry accused. I'm not twisting anything. I'm responding to what you're saying. If you don't like how it sounds, maybe that's something to think about. Harry put his phone away and straightened his jacket. I want to leave. Now. Then leave, Bill said simply. Nobody's stopping you. But before you go, let me say this. You had a chance to be a real force for good. You had the platform, the resources, the name recognition. You could have used all of that to actually make a difference without dragging your family through the mud. But you chose the easy path. You chose to be a celebrity instead of a change maker. And that's sad, Harry. It's really sad. You have no idea what you're talking about, Harry said, but his voice had lost its fire. Maybe I don't, Bill conceded, but I know this. Running away doesn't solve problems. Blaming everyone else doesn't solve problems. And playing victim when you're one of the most privileged people on the planet definitely doesn't solve problems. Harry walked toward the edge of the stage, then paused. History will prove me right. People will understand eventually. Maybe, Bill said, or maybe they'll just remember you as the prince who couldn't handle being a prince. Time will tell. Harry descended the stairs from the stage, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The camera followed him as he walked past the audience, his face set in fury. Bill turned back to the main camera. Well, folks, that was something. I've had guests walk off before, but never with quite that much drama. I guess when you're raised to believe you're special, criticism hits a little harder. Someone from the audience shouted, "That was brutal, Bill." Bill shrugged. The truth usually is. Look, I don't take pleasure in making people uncomfortable. But I also don't think anyone should be above tough questions, especially when they've put their whole life story out there for public consumption. Harry wants to be taken seriously, but he only wants to be challenged on his own terms. That's not how the real world works. He paused, looking off stage where Harry had exited. I hope he figures it out eventually. I really do. Because underneath all that anger and entitlement, there might actually be someone who could do some good in the world. But first, he's got to stop acting like everyone owes him something just because of who his grandmother was. Bill picked up his notes and shuffled them, his composure completely intact despite what had just happened. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll try to talk to someone who hopefully won't storm off stage. Stick around. The audience finally erupted into applause and shocked chatter as the lights dimmed. Producers rushed onto the stage, speaking frantically into their headsets. Bill remained at his desk, taking a sip of water and checking his notes for the next segment, as if having a prince storm off his show was just another Tuesday night. Behind the scenes, the control room was in chaos. The director was on the phone, probably with network executives. Camera operators were checking their footage, making sure they'd caught every moment of the confrontation. Production assistants were clustered around monitors, rewatching the exchange with wide eyes. On stage, Bill's producer approached him during the commercial break. "That was insane. Are you okay?" Bill nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. He'll be fine too, eventually. His ego is bruised, but that's about it. Do you think we should address it more when we come back?" "Nah," Bill said. "We gave it enough attention. Let's move on. The whole point was that he needs to stop making everything about himself. I'm not going to spend the rest of the show doing that for him." The stage manager counted down. "We're back in 5, 4, 3, and held up 2 fingers, then 1, then pointed at Bill. Bill looked into the camera with a slight smile. "Welcome back. So, I promise the rest of the show will be significantly less dramatic. Although I gotta say, if you're just tuning in, you missed quite a moment. But that's live television for you. Anything can happen." He transitioned smoothly into his next segment, a comedy bit about current events that had the audience laughing within seconds. Whatever had just happened with Harry, Bill wasn't going to let it derail the show. He was a professional, and he'd dealt with difficult guests before. But as the show continued, everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. A member of the British royal family had completely lost his composure on live television, had hurled insults at the host, and had stormed off stage in a fit of rage. And through it all, Bill Maher had remained calm, composed, and unwavering in his position. The contrast couldn't have been starker. On one side, a prince who demanded respect simply because of his birth, who couldn't handle basic questions about his own choices, who resorted to personal attacks when challenged. On the other side, a comedian who'd earned his platform through decades of work, who asked tough questions because that was his job, who never lost his cool even when being insulted. As Bill wrapped up the show that night, he made one final reference to what had happened. Before we go, I just want to say one thing about our earlier guest. I don't regret anything I said tonight. If you put your life on television, in books, in interviews, you open yourself up to commentary. That's the deal. And if you can't handle that, maybe don't do all those interviews. It's pretty simple. He smiled at the camera. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week. And hopefully, all our guests will make it through the entire interview. The audience laughed and applauded as the show's theme music played and the credits rolled. Bill stood up, shook hands with the crew members nearby, and walked off stage. Just another night at work, even if it had been one of the most explosive interviews in the show's history. In the parking lot, Harry's SUV peeled out, security detail in tow. Inside the vehicle, he was already on the phone, no doubt calling his publicist to do damage control. But the damage was done. The footage was captured. The confrontation was real. And unlike his carefully controlled Netflix documentaries and pre-planned interviews, this had been raw, unscripted, and revealing. Back in the studio, Bill sat in his dressing room, scrolling through his phone. Social media was already exploding with clips of the interview. Some people were praising Bill for not backing down, for asking the tough questions. Others were defending Harry, saying Bill had been too harsh, too mean. Bill put his phone down and leaned back in his chair. He'd known the interview might get heated. Harry's sensitivity to criticism was well documented, but he hadn't expected the full meltdown, the personal attacks, the dramatic exit. Then again, maybe he should have. When you spend years in an environment where no one challenges you, where everyone defers to your title, the real world must feel like a pretty harsh place. The thing that struck Bill most wasn't the anger or the insults. It was that moment when Harry had said his family deserved it. That brief, unguarded admission that all the public attacks, all the revelations, all the drama had been intentional. Not a reluctant necessity, but a choice. A weapon. Bill understood family drama. Everyone had it. But there was something particularly troubling about weaponizing it, profiting from it, and then playing victim when called out. That was the heart of what bothered him about Harry's whole narrative. The contradiction of it all. The wanting it both ways. As Bill gathered his things to leave for the night, his producer knocked on the door. Network wants to know if you want to make a statement. About what? About Harry walking off. They're getting calls from his team, apparently. Bill shook his head. No statement. The interview speaks for itself. If they want to complain, they can complain. Won't change what happened. His people are saying you ambushed him, that he wasn't prepared for those kinds of questions. Bill laughed. He wasn't prepared to be asked about his own book, his own interviews. Come on. He was prepared to be softballed. And when he didn't get that, he couldn't handle it. That's not my problem. The producer nodded. Fair enough. It's going to be a big story tomorrow. Probably, Bill agreed. But tomorrow there'll be another story. That's how this works. Harry will move on to the next interview, where someone asks him easier questions, and everyone will forget about tonight. But as Bill drove home that night, he knew that wasn't quite true. People wouldn't forget. This interview would be replayed, analyzed, dissected. It would become part of Harry's story, another chapter in his complicated relationship with media and public perception. And maybe, just maybe, it would make him think twice about assuming every interview would be a friendly platform for his grievances. The real question was whether Harry would learn anything from it. Would he reflect on why he'd reacted so strongly? Would he consider that maybe, just maybe, some of the criticism was valid? Or would he retreat further into his bubble, surround himself with more yes people, and continue to blame everyone else for not understanding him? Bill pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a moment, engine off. He'd interviewed hundreds of people over the years, politicians who'd lied to his face, celebrities who'd dodged every question, activists who'd turned interviews into lectures. But this was different. This was someone who genuinely seemed to believe that his suffering made him immune to criticism, that his trauma justified any action, that his intentions mattered more than his impact. Inside his house, Bill poured himself a drink and turned on the television. The late-night shows were already covering it. Clips of Harry storming off, his face red with anger, were playing on loop. Commentary from pundits was mixed. Some thought Bill had gone too far. Others thought he'd been spot on. The debate would rage for days, but Bill knew something the pundits didn't. Something that had been clear in Harry's eyes during that interview. Beneath all the anger, beneath all the indignation, there had been a flash of recognition. A moment where Harry had heard the criticism and, just for a second, wondered if there might be some truth to it. That moment had passed quickly, buried under defensive rage, but it had been there. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that tiny seed of doubt would grow over time. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, Bill had done his job. He'd asked the questions that needed to be asked. He'd pushed back when appropriate. He'd treated Harry not as a delicate royal who needed kid gloves, but as an adult who should be able to defend his choices. As Bill finished his drink and headed to bed, he felt no regret about the interview. Yes, it had been uncomfortable. Yes, Harry had walked off. But uncomfortable conversations were sometimes necessary. And if Harry couldn't handle one tough interview, how was he supposed to handle the much tougher challenges that life would inevitably throw at him? The night grew quiet. The controversy would continue to bubble and boil for days, maybe weeks. But in this moment, it was just Bill, alone with his thoughts, knowing he'd done exactly what he'd set out to do. He'd held a mirror up to someone who desperately needed to see himself clearly. Whether Harry would look in that mirror and actually see what was there, well, that was up to him.